Yep, all good. Right then, so we'll get going. So like I said, all about nutrition throughout the menopause. There we go. So there we go, it's going to stop. So let's go through what we're going to cover today. So we will be covering through the effects of menopause on body image and body composition, and the role of nutrition during menopause, and which bits are actually relevant and which is more just general healthy diet. A few macro and micronutrients that are relevant during menopause, and then also going through the lifestyle factors to optimize your energy levels, and then to also manage your mindset for success and longevity in managing your nutrition. Because you might have experienced times when you have tried to make nutrition changes and you could be very well quite knowledgeable in a general healthy diet. You may have tracked calories before, you may have manipulated your diet in the past, and you might be feeling a little bit confused about why it is now that you're starting to struggle when perhaps you've never had this struggle before. Or you might be someone that's always struggled and never quite been able to get the head around it all. So hopefully by the end of today, you'll feel better equipped with the tools to go forward and be able to make healthy changes to your diet that support your body and your mind throughout menopause and the rest of your life as well. So if you're thinking that you're imagining the body changes that you've been seeing, you're not. That your body does actually change when you go into menopause, and actually the fat distribution itself also changes. So if you're an average woman, many women have more of the pear shape where they have more distribution of fat over the thighs and the bottom. You might have noticed in recently that you've got more fat distribution around the middle of the body, around the stomach, which might be giving you more of that apple shape, which I know can be really confusing and also can be quite frustrating, especially when you might have noticed actually you're having fat loss efforts, but don't feel like you feel that change in your clothes size. Because if you think about it, when we use clothes to measure ourselves, we actually often look at our waistband, and that's the thing we're thinking, oh yeah, that feels loose, I feel like I lost weight. But actually, because you've got that more fat distribution around the stomach, you're not getting that kind of feedback. You might be losing it from other areas of your body, but there's a very good chance, if that's been a measure before, that you're actually focusing on that middle part of your body around the stomach and wondering why it's not changing. So the reason this changes, as you've probably had some education around menopause before, so I'm not going to go into massive detail with this, but your hormones do change during menopause. I'm sure this isn't complete news to you. We have a decrease in things like testosterone, your sex steroid hormones, and also your estrogen drops to a level similar to men. So this causes redistribution of body fat, actually increases hunger levels as well. So the low estrogen levels actually cause an increase in a different hormone, which is responsible for making you hungry. So you can get an increase in a hormone called ghrelin, and this makes you feel hungry. Now, normally ghrelin will be high at a time when you need to eat, and it will reduce when you've eaten. However, you will be producing more of this hunger hormone because of low estrogen levels. And also you may have a reduced sensitivity to the hormone that tells you you're full. So that hormone is called leptin. So again, when the body fat stores are high, or when you've already eaten, you will then not feel hungry because the leptin is then saying, yep, we're full, our body fat stores are full as well, so we don't need to eat as much. However, this can also be affected with the changes in hormones as well. So again, so if you're thinking, why am I so hungry? Why is my body not changing? Then that is why. So although this all comes down to energy balance when we're looking at making changes to weight, managing weight or managing overall health, that is true. But during menopause, it gets a lot more difficult to manage because of increased hunger, body fat being in places where you're probably not a big fan of. Also, these changes in hormones are going to cause a rapid decline in strength and muscle mass. Now, don't worry, if you're training, it's not just going to all disappear overnight. So if you're someone that trains regularly, you're lifting weights, doing some cardio, that sort of thing, you're not suddenly going to wake up one day with no muscle. However, in somebody that doesn't do any training at all, you're going to be a lot more susceptible to these changes in muscle mass. So it will drop relatively quickly in comparison to the younger years. Great news is that you can actually slow this down a lot by doing resistance training, which I will cover a little bit more later on. Also, you might have heard of a term called NEAT. which stands for non-exercise activity thermogenesis, and that's why it's shortened. And this is basically everything that isn't exercise. So walking when you take the stairs instead of a lift, how much you move around at home. So when you decide to spring up and do a bit of cleaning, sort of go get something, decide to walk to the shops or walk around the block, those sorts of things. So they're all sort of your NEAT. And this can reduce quite a lot. And the other reasons this might reduce is because perhaps your job might have changed as you've got a little bit older. You may have a more senior position, so you might be sitting down at a desk a little bit more. You might work from home now, but previously you didn't. So there's some lifestyle factors, but some of them are actually directly linked to menopause, because menopause changes can also affect your sleep. It can be very much disrupted, which then again is going to increase your fatigue level. So if you've got increased fatigue, you're going to feel less like you want to get up and do things and move around, and you might do things with a little bit less zest than you used to. And all these tiny little things add up to you not expending as much energy as you used to, but you feel maybe even 10 times more tired than you used to. So you have got quite a lot of things to deal with when you're in the menopause. So as you can see now, it's probably not too surprising that if you are finding it difficult, then this is why. So basically, it is a tough time and you're not imagining it and you are going through a lot. But there are things you can do to make it much better, and you can manage these symptoms and you can manage yourself, your mindset going forward. So today we're going to equip you with some tools to be able to do that. So there we go. So I'm going to head too much. So yeah, 3-step system. So really things you want to be focusing on: optimizing nutrition, energizing your lifestyle, mastering your mind. So you may feel like all these 3 areas of your life have been quite affected quite a lot by menopausal changes. So we're going to look at things that we can do to combat this. Okay, so first one, optimize nutrition. So a lot of the time I do get questions around supplements, but ideally we want to go with a food first approach. So I'm not going to give you a massive lecture today about what to eat and drink as such, because the healthy eating model, the Eat Well guide, is actually a really good guide for most people. So you can actually follow that in terms of your portions of fruit and veg, meats, protein sources, carbohydrates. But I'm going to go through some slightly more specific advice around menopause, more that what's a little bit different from the general population type of advice. So with the fruits and vegetables, you're probably going to find you want to go a little bit higher. So I know there's the 5-a-day rule, or the 5-a-day message out there, but for yourselves, again, because you're dealing with potentially reduced energy expenditure and increased hunger, you're going to really want to increase the volume of your foods so that you can feel more full and like you're eating more when actually you're reducing your calories, if fat loss is a goal. But also, it's not just about the calories, it's not just about a fat loss goal. You are in need of plenty of vitamins and minerals, which fruits and vegetables are going to provide you with. So actually aiming slightly higher if you can, with your portions of fruit, with your portions of vegetables, and then aiming for a proportion of about 2 of those portions being fruit. Thing being that when you get to menopause, you can actually have some changes in your insulin sensitivity, which means it can be a little bit harder to manage high amounts of carbs. Now, this doesn't mean you should cut carbs out or that they're the enemy in any way, but more of a focus on the vegetables over the fruit can help, one, manage your calorie balance, and secondly, again, manage how your body is handling these nutrients. In terms of additional vitamins, the way things change for menopause, the vitamin D levels, actually, it's the same for everybody, every adult, but I put it in there because it becomes a bit more important because you're past your peak bone mass age. The hormones aren't there to support ongoing bone mass development. So actually you're at higher risk of getting osteoporosis. So making sure you are getting the vitamin D alongside enough calcium, so ideally from the diet, but you can get milks that are supplemented, or taking plenty of dairy will also help with this. Again, we're in the UK, we don't get enough sun most of the time, so a 10 microgram vitamin D supplement can be helpful, particularly in the autumn and winter months as well. So we're kind of just coming out of that now, but I mean, how many days we really get that sunny? So a lot of my clients will actually benefit from having that pretty much year round. Of course, I'm going to caveat, please speak to your medical professionals, because I don't know what medications you're on. I don't know if you've got any allergies or problems. So marry that up with your doctor as well. But these particular vitamins are quite helpful and important for you in terms of looking after your bone health. So again, like I say, we're managing the hunger with higher volume foods, making sure we're getting plenty of highly nutritious foods as well. In terms of managing macros, so protein is your priority. So we're looking at having a higher protein intake, which 1.5 to 2 grams of protein per kilogram, if you get your calculator out, basically if you double what your body weight is in kilograms, you might see that is quite a bit higher than what you might be eating now. Obviously, this is all in relation to whether you're actually tracking it as well. You might not be aware of how much protein is in particular foods, and that's okay, because I'm going to go through some other options after. Again, if you do have a high BMI, so if it's over 30 or in the obese category, protein levels and protein requirements will be different. So if you do want some more personalised advice, feel free to get in touch with me after, and we can go through something a little bit more personalised in terms of options. You tend to do a little bit better as well on slightly higher fats. Again, so that should be around 35 to 40% of total calorie intake if you're going to go down the route of tracking your nutrients and tracking your food and drink. You can use like a calorie tracker like MyFitnessPal, NutriCheck. There's quite a lot of them, but those two tend to be the most widely used around sort of this area, around in the UK anyway. And in terms of setting a calorie goal, I'm just going to give you a couple of tips now. If you are going to think about tracking, is start anywhere. So you have two options. You can track what you currently eat, and that will tell you what you're eating. And if your weight is stable and you want it to be stable, carry on. If you want to lose weight, take some calories off. If you're trying to gain weight, add some calories on. It's as simple as that. So you can either track what you currently eat, or you can use a calorie calculator. They're all much of a muchness, so it doesn't really matter which one you use. But my main advice is, please don't select the maximum rate of weight loss, because it will come out with 1,200 calories and that might not be appropriate for you. So just be mindful of trying to go really low in your calories, because it can make it really difficult to stick with in the longer term. And this can lead to those feelings of failure and those feelings like, I can't do this, or I do it for 2 weeks and then I give up because I'm starving. So then it's really important that you sort of start somewhere and then monitor your weight. Monitor some measurements, because that's really going to help you make slightly more sustainable changes. And in terms of carbohydrates, just whatever calories you have left, you can take as carbs. So essentially, I wouldn't worry about breaking it down too much, but if you can prioritise protein and getting plenty of fruits and vegetables, then actually you're going to do much better in terms of feeling full and satisfied, and also protecting yourself from muscle loss and bone loss as well. So they're the most important things there. Just a little note as well, if you do find it more difficult to lose weight now, you may actually have lower requirements. Like we said, you might be a little bit less active than you realise. And like I say, your metabolism could be running 200 to 300 calories less per day, which is quite significant, especially if you're quite small, if you're quite short, or you're not very heavy in the first place. That is quite a big change. So that is why it is hard. So this is why you need to be kind with yourself and be gentle with yourself. Again, if you think about, how long do you want to make these changes? If you want to do it for the rest of your life, then do something you can do for the rest of your life and give yourself time to get used to it. You're never going to be perfect straight away. You're not going to get everything right. There's going to be ups and downs. It's about giving yourself that space to actually accept that you're going to try something. You might find it hard. You might need to change it and make it easier, and just to be okay with that as well. So you can actually, rather than berate yourself for going a bit wrong, maybe you eat more than you expected, maybe you forget to track. That's not a problem. It's just actually learn from those experiences, rather than thinking I'm a bad person, or I can't do this. Actually you can, but sometimes I think we're just a little too hard on ourselves as women, regardless of menopause. So I think it's just being a little bit kind to yourself and thinking about your health overall. As also what I mentioned as well, the metabolic considerations, insulin sensitivity can be reduced, which means the insulin you produce might not work as well as it did before. So then the glucose that you get from food might float around in your blood for a little bit longer than you want it to. So insulin is not a bad thing, but it just might not be as effective as it was previous. So you might do a little bit better with a bit lower carb intake. But again, if you put in place the high portions of vegetables with a little bit of fruit, plenty of protein, you'll probably find there's not lots of space for carbs anyway. But again, it's still important to have, and definitely I'm not telling you to cut them out because there's lots of nice foods that have them in as well. So I said if you didn't want to track, that there's another way to look at things. So again, if you're not really a numbers person or tracking's not for you, you can actually use your hand portions. So by using like the palm of your hand, that would be your protein portion. Vegetables, you can count a portion as a fist size amount. Carbs is like a cupped hand like this, and fats is like a thumb size. So hopefully that gives you a bit of an idea about what a portion is. This doesn't mean you can only have that portion per meal, but if you start to use this as a way to measure portions, you'll have more awareness about how many portions you've had. So for example, if you were trying to get to something like 130 grams of protein per day, you're probably looking at a portion to 2 portions for every single meal, so even breakfast. So again, that's just one way to look at it. So again, you're looking at how many portions are you currently eating, what would you like to change, and then you can take away a portion or reduce if you need to. If you need to bring weight down, you can reduce the carbohydrate portion first, maybe increase the protein portion slightly, see how that works out. Again, just to bring some awareness to fats as well, they are very high calorie, they're very calorie dense. So you can see here where the nuts are, sort of that would be a portion. So you can see it's about 6 nuts. So if you're someone that really likes that, it's quite easy to overeat, and they're very tasty. Like with all highly palatable foods, foods that are tasty tend to be high calorie, and that's because the manufacturers are well onto it. So when we have a combination of sugars, salts, protein, that umami sort of flavour like Marmite, that sort of thing, sweet stuff, all that combination actually makes you want it more, it makes you crave it more. Food manufacturers are onto this, so they've put those combinations in place more so often. So if you notice, there's a lot of salted caramel stuff now, because basically you've got sugar and salt and fat if it's like an ice cream. So that is like very, very highly valuable to the body. And if you think about it, it's not been that long in terms of evolution since we've had such easy access to food. Previously, many prehistoric times, we had to hunt for our food. So we wanted to save energy by not moving. And we wanted to make sure that when we did make all the effort to get food, we picked the most high calorie, highly valuable foods possible. So if you've been looking for 3 days for food, you're not going to choose broccoli, you're going to choose the high protein, high fat, sugar, salt type food, because that's going to pack in the calories as quickly as possible. This actually gets your brain to light up full of dopamine as well. So when you have that sort of food, these sort of highly palatable foods, mostly are quite processed as well because they've had them these things added. Your brain just gets all that reward hormone, so dopamine is your happy hormone. So when you eat these sorts of food, you feel sort of happier and more satisfied and driven to eat more. So if that's sort of you, then that is part of your genetics, but we can still work around it by encouraging ourselves to eat higher volume foods, focus on the protein and have more whole foods rather than processed foods. That way we're not giving ourselves such doses of this reward dopamine hormone that we then crave it even more. Doesn't mean never have these things, but having them in smaller amounts and having whole foods in larger amounts just helps to manage that a little bit better, rather than getting your body used to having reward, then you just end up wanting more of it. So yeah, so it's just balancing that out really. So specific type of foods that relates to menopause. So phytoestrogens. So these are mostly in plant-based foods, and they've just got weak estrogenic chemicals, and they're in the plants. Very similar structure to estrogen and its byproducts. So it does sort of attenuate some of that low estrogen effect. So it will help to reduce bone loss. It will help to, especially reduction with hot flushes. And again, you find mostly in like flax seeds, nuts and berries, so your ligands, and then soybeans, legumes, nuts and berries also. So there's sort of your polyphenols, your flavonoids. So those sorts of foods, again, they're going to produce estrogen-like effect, which might actually improve some of the menopause type symptoms. The downside to it though is that it might have an impact on your HRT. So definitely if you're going to increase these foods significantly in your diet, definitely talk to your team about this, your specialist team or your doctor, to see if there's likely to be any impact on any HRT that you might be on. So just something to check into, or again, if you're not on HRT, these could actually be quite helpful. So something worth experimenting with. But again, if you're on medications, you're on HRT, definitely check in with the medical team as well. So going on to energising the lifestyle. So this is really about how to combat fatigue. So again, we just said that fatigue is a major issue once we have these drops in estrogen, which then brings your calories down. And the last thing you want to do is have less calories to work with. So basically what we're looking at, you probably hear 10,000 steps all over the place, but actually 8,000 steps is a really good marker to work towards for health. So if you're currently struggling to get to 10,000 steps, start with trying to get to 8,000. So try to do more than where you are now. It's actually going to work really well. Of course, you can do more. I'm not saying that sit down on the couch after 8,000 or 10,000, but by the time you get to about 12,000 a day, you're on to diminishing returns. So I'm not saying sit down as soon as you hit 12,000. If you naturally have quite a high step count because you're on your feet and you're always moving around, that's totally fine. But if you're someone that's going out specially to get those extra steps, then once you've hit about 12,000, there's definitely less return, less improvement, and less rewards for going out and trying to push it to 15,000 or 18,000. Like I say, at that point, you might be better off doing a more intense form of cardio rather than trying to just spend hours walking. You've probably got a better use of your time. But definitely for health, 8,000 is a great target. And again, like I say, once you're at 12,000, you don't need to push it at that point. So hopefully that helps to manage your time a little bit better and maybe choose some exercise that you enjoy as well. So next thing we said, like I say, sleep is highly affected by menopause. You might really struggle. You might wake up at strange times. You might find your routine gets thrown off, maybe because you don't sleep, and then you then get up late or early, and it just can really throw you off. So there's no one and done way to just suddenly fix this. None of these things are going to just be like, oh yeah, that's fixed. But we can improve it, and you can just improve your chances of improving your sleep. So main thing is really regularity around bedtime. So every day. So if you've got a set sleep and get up time, stick to that, even on the weekends. Because sometimes it's the weekends that throw us off. We might just be getting the hang of it by Friday, and then here comes a weekend, you stay up late and maybe sleep in, or some sort of combination, and that can actually then start to sort of throw you off. So if you really are trying to regulate sleep, having the same sleep and wake times through the week can be helpful if that's something you can put in place. Again, reducing blue light exposure or any light exposure really before bed. Ideally sort of a couple of hours, but again, if you're someone that's on the phone right up to bed, we just start with half an hour. Start with a bit of reading and things like journaling and sort of relaxing stretches and things like that before bed as well can just really help get you in a better position to have a good night's sleep. Now, I put sleep divorce in, so don't worry, I'm not trying to like tell anyone to do anything dodgy or worrying with a relationship, but I just want to address it because I think sometimes people get a little bit nervous about talking about this. So like I say, you might find spending more time in a separate bed will help you sleep. Now, this doesn't mean it's a negative on your relationship, and I'm not saying you have to do this, but some people do benefit from actually having a separate sleeping environment from the partner, one for their temperature management, maybe because they might snore, or just you might be a very, very light sleeper. So again, I'm not saying this is for everyone that you have to do it, but I just wanted to put it out there because again, I know there's people that have been doing it and they feel a bit bad, like they feel like they can't talk about it. And also, again, might never have thought about it and think and see it like, oh, should I really do that? Or I think I'd like to, but I'm not sure if I should. So it's one of them, like it can help, but like I say, not saying everyone has to do this. So resistance training. Ideally, you want to be going for your resistance training twice weekly. So I'd say that's a good minimum. It gives you a chance to work all of your body muscles. So full body training, if you're just going to do it twice a week, is ideal. Progressive overloads, this is what I mean by this, is actually gradually making it harder. So rather than doing it for longer or getting your heart rate up more, you can try to work your muscles. So it can be things like body weight exercises. So it might be like body weight squats, tricep dips on like the couch or something like that. Resistance bands, so where you're stretching bands, you may be doing bicep curls with them, pulling them apart, using them to create resistance with squats. And it can be going into the gym, so that's where you use machines like pulley machines, you know, cable machines, things like that, and then free weights like dumbbells, barbells, all these things. So they include using weights. So it's not about getting particularly sweaty, although you might sweat and you might get hot, but it's really about giving those muscles something to work with. So it should feel heavy, you should feel maybe a little bit of an ache during it, but you're not looking to crawl out of the gym or feel like you can't do anything else after that. But by doing that twice a week, that's really going to help you to reduce that muscle loss, and also look after your bones, because like I say, if your bones are at risk of reducing their density over the next few years, actually doing that resistance training just puts the muscles and the bones under enough stress that they know they need to stick around. And especially if you are actually thinking about dieting as well, doing resistance training tells your body you need to keep the muscles. So if you're someone that wants to look more toned, what you don't want necessarily is to just be a smaller version of how you are now. When people say they want to be toned, they tend to mean they want a little bit more shape, maybe be slimmer in some areas, have a little bit shape in others. And doing weights will really help with this as well. It'll help you keep hold of muscle whilst you're losing fat. As if you're cutting calories and doing no resistance training at all, it's quite likely that your body will just see most of what's there in your body, whether it be fat, muscle, anything like that, is just going to be treated as fair game. But if you're using your muscles and challenging them, then the body's like, well, we better keep the muscles because we keep lifting weights, but there's some spare fat here, so let's use that for energy. So that's basically what we're doing. We're telling the body, yeah, don't get rid of our bones, don't get rid of our muscles, we need them. Whether you try and lose fat, then obviously we're signaling keep these, but even if you're not, if you're trying to maintain your weight, then actually it's just telling it that we need it, please keep it, because it's not part of aging that we want to lose it. So it's just really signaling to body, we're using it, we're lifting heavy things, please don't go anywhere. So yeah, so next we're looking at self-compassion. It can be really easy to just get overwhelmed. There's so much information out there, which is why I haven't just lectured you on lots and lots of things about food itself today. There's already a lot of information out there, and I can refer you on to some government and some British Dietetic Association information guides as well, which are very good. But the last thing you need is like more ways of doing things. You just need effective strategies that are going to work for you to help you make the most of the efforts that you are putting in place. And again, a lot of that's being compassionate with yourself. You don't want to be thinking, oh, that didn't work, I'm no good, or I never get this right. Like I say, if you tell yourself you're right or you're wrong, you'll be right. So by this, we're going to have a look at ways that you can get over blips and again, manage things like cravings and difficult thoughts that can come up. Of course, I'm not a psychologist, I'm not trying to take the place of them, but there are some very good strategies we can use that work really well alongside nutrition and support nutrition change as well. So mastering your mind then. So like I say, health is very multifaceted. It's not just one thing. It's not just about physical health. There's emotional and psychological health as well. So in terms of managing your eating and managing any nutrition long term, whether you find yourself overeating, whether you have sort of subclinical binges, you know, where you might not have binge eating disorder, but you do feel you have periods of loss of control over your eating, then actually what you might have is not necessarily a food knowledge problem, but you have more of an emotional regulation problem. So you might find your current emotions really difficult to deal with. So we're going to go through strategies to handle that and how this can improve your nutrition. Again, I'm going to look at distress tolerance. So again, when we go into menopause, it can actually be harder to tolerate distress. You might feel like you've softened up a bit, or you might find things more distressing than you did in the past. And that is down to hormonal changes as well. So that can be the case. Or it might be that you've always had a little bit of trouble here and never quite got on top of it. So again, dealing with that can actually help you manage cravings. So you may not have put those two together before about tolerating distress, managing cravings, but actually they're very closely linked, and they've got technique to help with that as well. Again, as you learn new skills, self-compassion is really important. One, to help you get practice, but also as you develop yourself, you'll start to look back on things and think, oh, do you know, if I'd known this 10 years ago, I'd have done so much better. What would my life have been like if I'd have got on top of this 5 years ago? So it's just looking back on that as well. So once you do improve your life, once you improve your self-worth and your self-image, it's just being really compassionate with yourself, thinking, okay, well, I didn't know that before. Okay, my life is different now. Let's just like not dwell on the past. Let's not think about, oh, I wish I could be like I used to be in my 20s. It's sort of like letting that go, acknowledging where it's got you so far and moving forward more positively, rather than dwelling on where you think you should have been better, or thinking that one blip derails everything for you. So looking at what it is to really feel like you're doing well in life. There's a lot of things involved with this. So this is from a study, actually. It's kind of related to religion and spirituality, but I think it has a lot of application over to what we might want out of life, because if you ever get to that point where you've done the things that are expected of you, like you might have had kids, got a job, got a house, and think, what next? I think sort of with men, they sort of call it like the midlife crisis, whether we feel a little bit like that as women at times as well. We feel like, right, well, I spent all my life on the kids, I spent all my life getting so far in my career, now I feel a little bit meh. So it's looking at, actually, do you want to survive or thrive? So to survive is to just tick the boxes, meet the bare minimum, and just sort of tick along, and everything looks okay on paper, everything looks okay on the surface, but underneath you can feel a little bit unfulfilled. And this can actually lead to a lot of overeating as well, because you're looking to fill something that you can't quite fulfill, and you've done the career and kids, and you've done all these things, and think, why do I still not feel good? And this is where we can actually turn to food to manage our emotions instead. So when we're looking at really flourishing, we're looking to really look after our physical, mental health, happiness, life satisfaction. So are we really happy with our choices, or are we just living to tick boxes for other people's expectations? Are we having meaning and purpose in our life? I know through speaking to the ladies group that come on the Thursday, there's a few of them volunteer, and they talk about how satisfying that is. And again, I guess it just gives extra meaning and purpose. They know they're making a contribution to the world, and that has massive effects. So yeah, it's that sort of thing. That it doesn't have to be volunteering, but if you can see that example as to why, that helps a lot. Again, character and virtue, this is more about your values. So the things you value, are you living to those, or are you going against them all the time? So if you value family, but you're constantly having to work away, you know, that can make you feel uneasy about your life. So things like that can make you feel like you're not being your full self. And again, having close social relationships. So even if you're someone that likes to keep themselves, there comes a point where you do need a little bit of human contact, and feel like you've got someone to go to with certain things, whether it's, you know, an aspect of mental health, whether it's just someone you can have a coffee with and a natter and completely just rest your brain, but just having those little connections really make a fulfilling life. So you can see there's a lot involved here. And you can see if we leave any one of these things out, you can see where you're just going to have a little bit of that empty feeling. Not expecting to look at all this, but it's just to show you like how everything is just so got such a complex interplay between it. So you've got family, work, education, religion, or sort of spirituality, but then they affect everything else as well. So they all sort of lead into other, and they all affect each other as well. So we're complicated beings, so it's no wonder we can't just solve all this with a simple message like eat less, move more. So this is why we're going through more of these strategies rather than me throwing extra nutrition information at you. So little things that might need to change. You might have your own versions of these. More than happy to hear any things that you've heard as well at the end, that you might have heard, but things that I hear frequently from my clients, seeing fitness as a certain body type, they're looking on Instagram or Facebook and things like that and seeing a certain body type and think that needs to be them. Health means a particular scale weight, whether it means achieving a different BMI. Again, that's not necessarily true. Doesn't mean everyone will be healthy in a bigger body, but some people can be, and it's not always the case where weight changes in health instantly changes. Sometimes weight changes are a negative on the health as well. So again, that's a narrative that really needs to change. The whole grinding hard to get to everywhere, or you just don't want it bad enough. So again, you might have had these things said to you. You might have just heard them and feel like, oh, why can't I get this? And maybe I don't want it bad enough. You know, I just need to work harder. But the problem with that, the harder you work, the worse you feel. If you're not getting the results you want, then you start to think there's something wrong with you. Actually, there's different ways to get around this. So rather than working harder, sometimes taking a step back is really helpful. So things you want to consider for yourself, and show us at the beginning, actually, if you get a pen and paper, or if you've got access to one, this is going to be really helpful coming up. But again, it's on the recording, so if you want to go back, definitely answer these questions. So how can nutrition really help support all of those elements of health? And then also flip it. So how can the elements of health be used to get those results? So it doesn't have to be a case of, right, diet down regardless, change weight regardless. Think of it in the context of everything else you've got going on in life and everything else that you want from life, aside from scale weight or aside from changes in your body shape and type. So if you're someone that really struggles with focusing on scales and focusing on body weight, this is the time to get a pen and paper. So draw a circle and just think about what percentage time in your thoughts you give to these different areas. So you can actually, if you've got a phone, you can do it on your phone, and you can just write these down as well. So it's just an example how it might look. Obviously, you're not expecting a perfect circle. So thinking about aesthetics, so how do you want to look? How do you expect your body to look? Is there a particular weight or clothes size? Do you focus on that? How much of that time, or how much of brain space do you feel you're giving that at the moment? How much does performance matter to you? So how much do you think about the performance, and how much of that time do you give, and how much of that takes over your thoughts? Looking at work, again, how much are you thinking about work? How much do you want to be thinking about work? So have a think about that. And then family, how much brain space does your family take up? Is it as much as you want? Is it less than you want? And again, religion and spirituality, same thing. See how much you give into that. It doesn't have to be a religion or spirituality as such, but this is like things that can be like me time, things that help you feel replenished, whether it is journaling, meditation, whatever your version of spirituality is. It might be gardening, something like that. Something that sort of fills up your cup, if you know what I mean. So I'll just give you a couple of moments just to think about what those things can be, and then we'll move on. So good. Everyone okay so far? Just want to type a quick one in the chat if everyone's good. Everyone's following. So I know everyone might not be able to go in the chat because if you're on your phone. Right, we'll move on. Good stuff. Right, so hopefully you've had a little moment to think about these things. Feel free to go back over this later. You might want to give it a bit more thought time. So this is something that I've experienced with my clients. So before coaching, this is sort of the amount of time they may have been attributing to aesthetics. So about 50% of the time they're thinking about their body weight, scale weight, what they look like, how big the clothes sizes are. And then the performance took over a fair bit, 20%, 15% for work, a little bit for family, and then a very tiny amount for things that really support the spirituality, that really fill up the cup and make them feel good. And again, using the tools that I'm about to take you through next, they actually managed to flip that from such a focus on aesthetics to reduce that down, but also by taking a bit of focus away from how they look and what the body weight is, just left more space for things that they really wanted, a bit more family time, more performance, more time for the spiritual side of things, or the enjoyable things that they really do enjoy. So like I say, if we are thinking and spending all of our time thinking how much do I weigh, I need to bring my weight down, it doesn't necessarily get you any better results. It just tends to leave you feeling a bit more drained, a bit more frustrated, and more likely to overeat, and more likely to feel like this isn't for you, that you want to give up because it becomes just too mentally taxing. So by reducing some of that brain space for aesthetics, we then make more space for other bits of life. And ironically, the more bits of other life you do, the less important that becomes. But then actually those things happen along the way as well, because there'll be less episodes of overeating, less episodes of those binges, because you're not overly focused on this one thing, you're actually busy doing life. So body image. So like I say, you don't have to love your body. There's been a lot of love your body talk around the internet, whether that's something you've heard much of. So you don't have to love it. I mean, it's great if you do, and I hope you do. But if you're someone that doesn't, or you struggle with your body image, something called body neutrality is something that actually could really help. Because we don't need to be looking in the mirror going, oh, I love you so much, oh, look at this, aren't I great? Because sometimes actually, if you don't truly believe it, it just makes you feel worse. But actually what you can do is just shift that focus away. So rather than just looking at what your body looks, think about how it's supporting your life. On your worst day, be like, oh, okay, well, I have legs and they're going to get me up the stairs. So if you're having like a bad day, that might be the best thing that you can think about. But also sort of acknowledge what your body does. So is it allowing you to go and have an enjoyable day at the theatre? Is it allowing you to go to the gym and have a good time? I'm going to say good in inverted commas, and not everyone thinks that. But yeah, so like, what's it allow you to do? So rather than thinking about changing it so much, doesn't mean it's not okay to want to change it, but rather than thinking that's all you want to do, so actually, you know what, my body's not the worst place to live, but we can still want to improve it. That's okay. It's a bit like when you move into a house that's a bit of a fixer-upper. You move into that house, you think, you know what, the living room needs decorating, I need a new bathroom, and I'd like a new kitchen hob. But to actually overhaul all of those things all at once, you would need to like move out, and you don't want to do that. Maybe that's not practical. But so what you do is you learn to sort of be okay living in that house. You know those things want to change, but you're just going to take your time. You may be going to do, okay, we'll paint the living room first. We'll just take it one step at a time. Okay, we'll let that settle and then maybe go to the kitchen. So you can see how you can think about your body in that way. Think, okay, well, do you know what? My body generally is functioning all right. What can I do to help it function at its best? And okay, what can I do in a kind way that will help those improvements over time, but in a way that doesn't mean that my body then becomes unlivable, either because of how I'm talking to myself, or I'm actually dieting that hard that it's just not able to be sustainable. And it's where your body starts letting you down. So hope that analogy helped. So again, like I say, you can start to do that, start to focus on what your body does for you, how you can support it better, how you can be really kind so that it can keep doing these things for you. You're probably going to find less of a focus on wobbly bits, a lot more focus on life, which again is going to make everything much more sustainable for you. So looking at emotional regulation, so like we said, this is a big thing when it comes to managing overeating episodes, managing cravings, and again, managing urges to binge as well. So again, people that have this sort of issue around food often have a dulled response to their internal cues. They're a little bit insensitive to internal cues, things like hunger, feelings, emotional awareness. They may struggle then because they can't identify those cues. They then don't know how to regulate them, because if you don't know what's there, how do you change it? And again, because you're not fully aware, then you might experience distress. And if it's something that you don't know how to manage, you might just want to avoid it altogether. So you might think, oh, do you know what? I'm not going to try to diet. I'm not going to try and change my nutrition, because every time I do, I end up binging. So I'm just going to avoid it all completely. I'm just going to make sure I never change my diet. Or you might even think, oh, I'm not going, to go for that promotion at work because it's going to make me too sort of anxious. Like I say, this isn't to downplay people that have anxiety, and like I say, this isn't just going to suddenly fix it. But if you're on that borderline where you struggle with these things, actually there's things you can do and to help with improve on that emotional dysregulation, bring yourself more into line with how you want to behave and how you want to feel. Good. So where to start? So like I said, you can't fix what you don't know about. So it's identifying those thoughts, feelings, physical sensations in the mind and body. And then when you've identified what the problem is or what you're feeling, whether it's a problem or not, you can then minimize that judgment of yourself. So there's a lot of these things I think I shouldn't feel this way. It's probably the ultimate way to make yourself feel shame, and shame feeds into overeating. So minimizing any judgment of yourself, any thought, any feeling you have is totally okay. And then it's just going to let it sit there. So there's mindfulness techniques, meditation can allow you to look at just letting thoughts sit without trying to interact with them. It's called ACT, so it's action commitment therapy. So again, that's looking at how to sort of allow uncomfortable feelings to be there and just let them pass. You don't have to entertain them all the time. So that's going to really help sort of not judge yourself for whatever it is that you're thinking or feeling. It might even be like, I shouldn't be feeling hungry. Why am I hungry? And even that thought itself, thinking I shouldn't be hungry, starts to actually make the hunger worse. We are very complex beings, aren't we? So then once you've identified, once you can then reduce the levels of judgment to a more manageable level, this is where you create that space to be able to respond to your emotions and physical sensations. And because you're choosing the response, you're going to have better control over what you do. So looking at actually doing this in practice. So what you really need is to create that space. So has anyone ever sort of annoyed you and thought, oh God, that, they've really upset me. Now, how often do you instantly punch somebody in the face? I mean, I'm pretty sure you don't just do that straight away. There's a process that would come along before you did something like that. So what we want to do with these techniques is find that little bit of space between the feeling and the reaction. So you're not instantly reacting. So if somebody upsets you, rather than instantly reacting, you create just that moment of space where you can think, actually, is this how I want to respond to this situation? So it can be managing a relationship with somebody, especially if they made you uncomfortable. It can be things like looking at your hunger. So by taking some breathing practice, like I say, taking a moment to breathe, just creates a few seconds of space where your logical brain can kick in and try to manage actually what you're feeling emotionally, and then make a better decision for yourself. Again, hunger check's going to go through that actually, about how to know what your true hunger really is, so then you can then make a better decision about what's going to be best for you. A feelings check. So I have a workbook around this. I won't cover that today because there's so much to cover. I can't do everything today, but I have like a mind body scan that can really help with feelings checks. So do get in touch if you want me to give you that and talk you through that. Again, surfing the urge, I'm going to go through that technique. It's a really good one for cravings. Implementation intentions as well. So that's all about making sure that you can foresee the problems that you're going to have, and then thinking about an action plan before they happen. So if you can catch something before it happens, you can then make a better decision ahead of time. Makes it easier when it actually does happen. And these are all alternative coping strategies that just allow to create the space, create the awareness of what's actually going on, and then you can respond in a more appropriate way, which again might be eating and it might not be eating. So we'll go through the hunger scale. So you might have heard of this. So this is a way to sort of try to name what it is that you're feeling in terms of hunger. So if you can name it, you can change it. If you can name something, it takes a lot of power out of it as well, and just allows you to really look at what decision do you really want to make for your health, for how you want to feel, and for your goals as well. So I'll go through the different levels. So we've got your 1, so that is when you're absolutely hungry. So I don't know if you like missed a meal, then somebody, maybe you're not eating for like 8 hours, like you missed your meal, your lunch was rubbish, you hardly ate anything, and then maybe you get home in the evening, you're going to snap at somebody unless you eat now. So that's sort of that thing where you're no longer hungry, the ground, the stomach has gone, but you're just more angry, maybe you feel like you've got low blood sugar, it's that washed out rubbish feeling. 2, you're very hungry, you know you need food, you probably have got the growling stomach situation. Again, this sort of situations, you're more likely to want to grab food, so you're probably going to want to eat food that is instantly available. In this sort of situation, you're also going to want foods that are highly palatable, because at this point your brain is thinking about scarcity. It's thinking, if we're this hungry, there must be a shortage of food, so the next food we have must be high calorie, high sugar, high fat, high salt. So when we're in that situation, when we're at that level of hungry, we're more likely to feel like we want either craving something, or we want something that's going to be like a chocolate bar, pastry, that sort of thing. When we get into sort of around your 3s and 4s, you might feel it's a bit more manageable. You're going to be hungry, you want food. You might think you can maybe wait half an hour to maybe cook something. And like I say, that 4, you're sort of getting a bit of a grumble in the stomach, but maybe it's half an hour to your next meal. So you're like, yeah, that's fine, I can deal with that. Neutral, so 5s and 6s, this is kind of where you want to be, similar when you've just finished eating. So you don't necessarily want to get to that beyond full whilst you're eating, because it takes another 15 to 20 minutes for your brain to fully recognise what you have eaten, and then that can lead to feeling over full. So when you're eating, again, it's taking your time, because like I say, if you are eating very quickly, it's very hard for your brain to catch up to really notice how you're really feeling. So again, it's about taking that breath, taking your time, ideally having less distractions around meal times, because again, if you've got a lot of distractions, you're not going to be able to get in touch with how you're really feeling. Again, not saying that you just turn to this straight away and next thing you're going to be rate every single meal on a hunger scale, but maybe it's worth actually choosing one meal where it's a bit of a calmer time of day, whether it's breakfast if you get a bit of time to yourself, or whether it's tea. Just pick one that you think, actually, I've got a bit of space, got a bit of time to myself, and actually try to put this into place and see how you feel and see how far it gets you. So again, moving on with the scale, looking at sort of the feeling more full. So 7s, 8s, you're getting sort of that really full feeling. It's probably where you might stop and think, oh, you need to stop during a meal and have a bit of a breather, and you have to do that sigh. That's actually that point where you're kind of just going past the 6. So that's when you're getting a little bit full. Again, you're probably finding food doesn't taste as good by the time it gets to the 8 sort of level. So when you're sort of eating it thinking, oh, I'm bored of this, and actually that's your body saying you've probably had enough to eat there. The other reason you might feel like that is well, if you're eating a lot of samey foods, because their brain thrives off variety. So if you ever go for like picky bits or like a buffet, you'll find you eat a lot more than if you had like a pasta carbonara or something, because it's all the same, and you can get bored of it. So you can either be too full, or you might actually just be a bit like, yeah, it's all the same, I'm no longer stimulated by this food. If you ever had that experience where you have some crisps and then you want some Haribos and then you go back to savoury and then you So when you go sort of back and forth like that, that's the variety effect. So that can actually mess with your ability to recognise hunger. So as we're getting further on as well, so number 9, you're going to be really uncomfortable. This is probably like, maybe if you've been to a carvery, this is getting on to like Christmas dinner level. If you can relate to that, then it's where you're really uncomfortable and you're going to feel tired. When you've eaten that much, your blood flows all in your gut, so there's not much going. I mean, there is some going to your brain, but the priority there is going to be resting. Your body has got a lot to digest. And again, with 10, this is where you might really feel sick. You might feel like you've really overdone it. And again, if you have overeaten, if you've binged, this is where the feelings of guilt can come in as well, because when you're that full, not saying that you should feel guilty, but when people eat to this level, a lot of the time it can be because it's been in a slightly uncontrolled way, which is where the feelings of guilt can come in. So again, keeping yourself in that moderate space between 4 and 7 most of the time, you're going to feel much more in control of your food decisions as well. Okay, so surfing the urge. So this is all about managing distress feelings. Again, this covers cravings as well. So if you get cravings, it's kind of a form of distress. You might not recognize it as that, but the same skills you use to manage difficult emotions are the same skills you use to manage cravings. So it's just going to allow you to become more aware of what's going on without instantly or impulsively engaging in behaviours that are related to your mood. So it's going to help you sort of deal with those moments of, I need to eat that now. It can also promote that sort of radical acceptance, that ability to know that it's okay that I'm craving this, it's okay that this is happening, I don't have to respond to this right now. I can take a moment, I can decide how I'm going to deal with this. And again, it just provides you with those mindfulness skills. Again, mindfulness can be quite a fluffy term. It's banded around all over the place, but no one really ever tells you how to do it. So this is going to sort of help you ride the wave of the urge, get through it in a compassionate way to yourself, again, and then allowing yourself to manage those feelings and those experiences better in the future. So going for the 4 stages. So we've got your trigger. So focusing on what's caused that craving, what is it that you're feeling? So whether it is like, okay, I'm massively craving chocolate right now. So maybe you've seen chocolate, maybe you've seen an advert, you've smelt it, something like that. Something's triggered, like, okay, now I want it. Maybe it's that you are in a certain habit, or if you've had a stressful day, you normally have a stressful day and come back and eat chocolate. So you might have that sort of pattern forming. So you might have that urge for chocolate because you've had a stressful day, you've got in, you know it's in the cupboard, and you think, but I don't really want to do that. So this is sort of the thing, is like, okay, what's the trigger? What am I feeling? What my cravings telling me that I want? And then next thing, we're going to feel that ramp up. So it started, the seed's been planted, it's now starting to build, it's starting to feel a little bit more urgent, it's starting to feel a little bit more of a bigger emotion. And this is where then you're just going to accept what you're feeling, just acknowledge that you are experiencing a craving. And by doing that, by noticing it and naming it, you're going to be able to take control of it as well. So again, you're going to feel that urge build up even more. Then it's going to get slightly worse. It's going to go up to a peak. You're going to keep focusing on it. You're going to feel like you want it more and more. It's going to peak at around sort of 10 to 15 minutes. And at this point, you're going to be like, yeah, I want it. You might feel even as far as pacing, or that feeling of climbing the walls because you really want something that you haven't got. So that is reaching the peak. And when you feel like your worst, just know that this is about getting close to the time where it's about to get better. So you think about how that wave is built to its peak. It's only got one place to go at that point. It's only going to fall. It's only going to get better. So just continue to focus on your body. Maybe this is where they do the breathing exercises or the mind-body scan type exercise as well. And just sort of riding that through, just allowing it to wash over you, just allow it to happen. And then eventually tension will release. You won't feel the craving as much. It'll dissipate. You'll be like, yeah, I'm over it. I don't really want it that much now. It's similar to, like, actually, if you get distracted from eating, you're about to go and eat something, you got distracted, you forget that you're hungry. But again, this is how to deal with it when it feels stronger than that, when it feels like a real strong craving. You can actually just acknowledge that, you know what, when it's at its worst, it's about to get better. Okay. So implementation intentions. So this is a really good way of handling the curveballs that life throws at you. So basically, when we embark on any new journey, whether it's a fitness one, a health or nutrition one, sometimes we can have sort of rose-tinted glasses about it. We're like, right, I'm changing, this is the new me, nothing's going to get in the way now. And then something does get in the way. It's absolutely going to get in your way. Because if you think about it, you are making changes that you want to keep for life. And do you think you're going to have a life without a single problem ever again? Absolutely not. So this is what we accept, that you are going to have challenges. So why not prepare so you can deal with them better? So this can really help to create habits. And when you can establish good habits, it means in the long term, you're going to have less mental effort in the long term. So things like, I mean, how ingrained is brushing your teeth now? You might have been a challenge when you're like a baby or really young, but now it's just very much part of what you do. So just for an example, so what you're trying to do is think about what might get in your way of the habit you're trying to improve. So maybe you're trying to eat less snacks at work, because you know that actually you tend to be in biscuits quite a lot, and that does eat away at quite a lot of your calories for the day. So think about, well, okay, well, it's very likely that someone is going to bring in biscuits to work or snacks to work. So what you would do, you should create a little sentence for yourself, and you'd go, right, okay, so if I go into work and somebody brings snacks in, then I will make sure I have my own high protein snacks available. It doesn't have to be that specifically, but can you see where I'm coming from? So it's like, if, okay, if I'm going to the gym and my car breaks down, then I will go and do yoga in my living room. Okay, I mean, maybe sort your car out as well, but you can think of, okay, if something goes wrong, then I will do something that will help to solve that or make it better. So by thinking through things like that, especially if you notice patterns in the way that you behave, or patterns in the way where you tend to get derailed over and over again, try to think of actually how else could you handle that situation ahead of time. So rather than deny it, thinking, right, nothing's going to stop me this time, it's like, yeah, something's going to try and stop you. So how can we foresee that and put some things in place to help you? So just to go through everything, I've said covered quite a lot. So health really is multifaceted. I hope you can't hear my dogs. There is really more to nutrition than just calories. It's not just about the information, it's actually about how you're going to put this into practice. Again, working towards multiple measures of diet success is going to really help you. So maybe taking some of that focus away from purely the scales and just your body changing, and actually looking at how you can support your body where you live. And again, it's all about emotional regulation. It's going to affect your ability to follow through the course of action that you want to put in place. So again, you have the best plans in the world, but if you're not able to handle some of those difficult emotions, it can get very difficult to make that work in the long term. Again, body neutrality is really going to help improve your relationship with food as well. So if you're no longer thinking, I must change my body to the point where I love it, it's going to lead to sort of dieting, and no amount of dieting ever being enough or never being happy. So if you learn to accept your body, this doesn't mean you won't try and make changes. It means that you can accept it, and at some point you will be in a happy place with your relationship with food, and then you can get on with the rest of life. So hopefully, give these strategies practice. The best thing to do with these strategies is to practice them before you need them, because in the moment, if you haven't practiced this skill, you're not going to be able to use it. It would be like me taking you, if you don't swim and I chuck you in a swimming pool, I don't expect you to be able to swim. We're going to sort of start in the shallow end and learn how to do some strokes, kick your legs and things like that. I'm not just going to expect you to swim straight away. So I wouldn't expect you to be able to put these in place straight away. It's actually give them a bit of practice, experiment when you're not in immediate need of them. And that's going to really help you move forward as well. So any questions? Like I say, you can get me on Instagram as well, so feel free to tag me and join me on there. Like I say, if you've got any further questions, otherwise we'll take questions now, and I'll stop the slides.